Hi, I'm Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. I'm going to demonstrate a really easy, quick method for making a round placemat. So let's take a look at the placemat. Okay, now you can see I've used a print fabric on these little pears. I thought that was really pretty fabric. And on the back, I used just a plain green. Now, you can use the same fabric on the back that's on the front. It doesn't matter, so it's whatever you want to do, or you can just have two different fabrics. Now on this, if you get in kind of close, Mr. Cameraman, you'll see that I've got this spiral stitch that just keeps going round and round and round and round till I wind up in the center. This is a really easy stitch, so now I'm going to show you how to get your pattern going. Alright, so here it is. This is what I use for my round placemats. This particular placemat, they are readily available in your dollar stores, your 99-cent stores, all of these inexpensive places that they sell these items. They're about anywhere from 99 cents to maybe in some places it might be $2, but basically they're about $1 each. Okay, so this is what I use. It's 15 inches across this way in diameter, or draw your own circle. Okay, so what you want to do is take your fabrics. Now, I'm using in this demonstration heavy iron-on interfacing. You can use cotton batting if you like. The reason why I'm doing the interfacing is because it's a lot easier to do your top stitching on, whereas the cotton batting with the 2 layers of fabric has a tendency to stretch. So that's why I don't like using it in my round placemats. It's a little more difficult to work with. But if you choose to use it, I'll give you a few hints along the way as to how to stitch it all together. Now you want to take your fabric that's going to be on the top, which is my pear fabric. You want to have it face down. So you're looking at the back of the fabric. Then take your heavy, and I stress heavy, iron-on interfacing. And on one side of it, there's going to be glue. It'll be shiny. That's the side you want to put against the back of your fabric. So lay that down on the back of your fabric, and then at your ironing board, you're going to press it on. Now, it does require a damp cloth over it and a hot iron, but it's pretty quick to put it on. And when you're putting it on, you're just placing the iron down, lifting, placing. Now remember, there's a cloth over this, and then you just keep doing this, okay, all over the placemat. Doesn't take very long, so follow those instructions. Really simple and quick. Now once you've got that on, underneath all of this, go ahead and lay your fabric that you want on the back, which is my green. Have the front side up, and then place your top fabric on it. So you've got the front sides of both fabrics together. So now you're looking at your interfacing. Now take your template, which is this little round placemat I have. Lay it on top. Now I like to draw on the interfacing side because it doesn't stretch. So it's real easy to trace around this. Just make sure you push down on the edges as you begin to draw around it. Okay? So once you've got it drawn, now you want to take some straight pins, and you're going to place the pins around the edges, okay? And you're just going to keep placing them all over. But in one area, you want to leave an opening that's large enough for your hand to go through, because you're going to be turning this right side out later. So you want to put 2 pins on one side of the opening, on the side where you're going to end. So you're going to start stitching here, stitch on the pencil line, go all the way around, and as you're coming back around, this is where you're going to stop. Now at the start and stop point, you want to stitch back and forth to reinforce it a little bit. Okay, once you've got that done, I'm going to turn it. You're going to trim the fabric, and you want to leave maybe 1/4 of an inch or slightly less than 1/4 of an inch around the edges where the stitches are. Now up here where my opening is, don't have it too narrow because then you might have a tough time folding your edges in. So I would leave about 1/4 of an inch there. Okay, after you've clipped the excess fabric off, then I'm going to turn this a little bit. You're going to do little snips up to the stitch line, but not through the stitch line, okay? Because then it'll come apart. So you're going to do it all the way around where the stitch line is. Now at the opening, don't snip up to that pencil line. Just do ever so slight little snips. Just really tiny, short little snips along that opening, okay? Then, after you've done that, you're going to reach inside and go in and begin pulling this placemat right side out, okay? Now I'm going to move to another sample here. Now once you've got it right side out, this is where my opening was. You want to fold these edges inside. See how I've got it here? All right, so fold it in and then place pins there and just kind of smooth it out. The interfacing is going to help the edges flatten out rather quickly. Then you're going to go back to your ironing board and you're going to press the edges flat. Now don't drag your iron because it might shift the fabric that's glued on to the interfacing. So don't drag, just set it down around those edges to get it all nice and flat. And when you come to where the pins are, remove one pin at a time and begin pressing that edge nice and flat, okay? Or press around it there. Now you're going to do your stitches. So you may want to keep those pins in there while you're stitching. Now before I show you the stitches, I'm going to go over some options for doing your top stitching. Now, if you chose the cotton batting, it's a little bit harder for the placemat to lay flat. So as you're stitching, your fabric will stretch a little bit because it's thick. You've got the thick cotton batting and 2 layers of fabric. So if you have a walking foot, that's what this is, I would use this because then your fabric probably will not stretch as much or not at all. You don't want to get little tucks in your fabric. Okay, so use the walking foot if you're using cotton batting. Now if you don't have a walking foot, you can still do this, but you have to be careful that you go slow and you kind of hold your fabric really tight as you're stitching over it. Now let me show you another option. Now here is my presser foot on my machine. Okay, I'm trying not to wiggle. I got a weak hand, it doesn't hold things very well, so excuse my shakiness here. Well, let me hold it a different way. Here we go. Can you see, Mr. Cameraman? Okay, right there is a red line. Okay, look at that red line. That's where my needle goes. It goes right back behind that red line down into the fabric. But I don't want to look at that needle while I'm stitching. I'm going to look at this little point right there. Okay, it's the first little corner that pops out past that red line. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with it. Okay, so let's go over here. I'm going to put that little corner right on the edge. Okay, and as I stitch around the outer edge of my placemat, I'm going to look at that little corner, keeping it right against the edge. Don't look at the needle. So pick a spot on your presser foot that you can use as a guide. And if you look at that the whole time, it'll be nice and straight. If you start looking at your needle, you're going to start going all over the place. So pick a spot on your presser foot to keep against that outer edge. Okay, now let's go back to this, how I've got my foot set up for my spiral stitching. I've got this little bar. This little bar goes on the back of my presser foot. And I just stick it in there. There's a hole there. I stick it in, and it's used as a guide bar for top stitching. Now you may or may not have one of these with your sewing machine. My guide bar came with my walking foot. All right, so if you've got a walking foot, look in the box that it came in and see if you've got this little guide bar, because it can go on other presser feet that you have, now depending on your sewing machine. So you do have some options for this. So look around all your tools that came with your machine and see what you got. Now the reason why I have this little guide bar in there is because when I go to do the spiral stitching, it helps me to keep my stitch lines fairly even. So let's say I'm finishing up stitching along the edge. So I've come back to where I've started. Now I want to go inward because I want to spiral in towards the center. So I'm going to gradually move the presser foot in, very gradually. Now I'm going to turn the placemat a little bit, Mr. Cameraman. Okay, so I'm going to keep coming in until my bar hits that outer line. You see how it's laying on top? Now I'm going to look at the guide bar. I'm not going to look at the needle. And I'm going to keep that guide bar on that line. And I'm going to continue going around, keeping that guide bar on there. All right, now, once you come around, let me see where I am. Once you come around to where you started to veer off the first time, okay, so now I'm going to follow, focus on this line. I'm going to follow and put that guide bar on the next line. And I'm going to keep stitching and spiraling round and round and round. Okay? Now I want to show you something here. Now I'm using dark thread on this sample. So it really shows all mistakes that I've made. If you'll notice in here, it kind of got off a little bit. Look how nice and white it is here. But here it kind of went off somewhere. That's because temporarily, for just a second, I took my eye off of the guide bar and started looking at the needle. So you can see what can happen. All right? So make sure you keep your eye on the guide bar. Now, let's say you don't have a guide bar. Then what you want to do is look at the side of your presser foot and where your previous stitch line was and just eyeball it, trying to keep it the same width all the way around. Now I know this may sound like I'm getting complicated. I'm just giving you tips on what I've gone through over the years with sewing. So learn to eyeball this because you may not always have these nice little tools. Now another tip, let's go back to my original one. If you don't want your stitches to show and you think you've made a lot of mistakes, use light colored thread. Nobody's gonna know. Besides, their dinner plate's gonna be right over it, so no one's gonna see if you got off a little bit. Now, the spiraling stitch actually goes very fast, so don't think you're gonna spend 2 hours doing your spiraling stitch. It really does go fast, okay? Well, I hope you try to make these round placemats. They are really quick and really easy. If you cut out all your fabric at the same time, like I showed you in the beginning, you're only cutting once instead of 3 times, okay? So that's why layer those fabrics, cut out only once instead of 3 different times. Now, if you want other ideas on other placemats, there's a playlist that you can click on at the end of the video. So you're going to click on that upper right hand corner and it will take you through other types. Round, square, rectangle, all types of different placemats are there. Now, to keep informed on all my future videos, you got to click on that subscribe button. Once you do that, YouTube's going to send you a brief email. By the way, there's a subscribe button down there and up there, round picture of my face. Click on either one of those. So make sure you enter that email address when YouTube prompts you for it. Once you've done that, then YouTube sends you a brief email with a big button in the center. You click on it and it takes you directly to my latest video. I'm Cheryl and I'm so glad you came to my sewing room, and I'll see you next time, and happy sewing.